Hey friends, Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast, episode number 58, a student success story, Dan Walker. Now I'm excited this week because Dan Walker, I've known Dan for almost over a year. He took Riff to Radio, he did my masterclass tracking guitar like a pro, and he has just been growing by leaps and bounds in his production, his songwriting. He wanted to get into more long-term vision things. He wanted to have a career in music. So Dan signed up for a full year of coaching with me, and he's been crushing it. I've been focusing on helping him build up his business, to focus on his songwriting, his production skills, all of that we tackle. So I wanted to bring Dan on the podcast to talk about what is it like working with me for a full year? What is he working on? A little of his backstory, because trust me, when you hear Dan's story, you're going to be like, man, that sounds like me a little bit. Maybe I could make a living in music. I wanted to bring Dan on because sometimes we need a fire to, right under our ass to get us moving. And this conversation with Dan is going to do it. So hold on to your butts. Here we go. Episode number 58, Dan Walker. Dan, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
It is going good. Thank you for being here because this is going to be awesome. I've known you for a while and seen your growth and your progress. And I just want to talk about like all of it, but also, things that you're going to be getting into, but a little bit of your musical past too.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that. Like, I've known you for a little bit. We've been doing coaching. You did Rift Radio. You've grown into what you already were, producing. Like you were starting to get into that realm, but like in that, I'd say like year or so.
Yeah, it's been just about a year. Yeah.
You've just like, your productions have gotten so much better. Your songwriting's gotten a ton better, but now you're just making the shift of like doing music. Could you tell me a little bit before, what was your musical background? Like, prior?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been doing music basically my entire life. My dad's a musician. So I just grew up with it around me everywhere. I think the first ever musical thing I probably did was like singing in his children's choir at church. I was like seven years old. I think, oh yeah, in fact, I was actually a year too young to officially be in the choir, but he ran the choir. So he was like, yeah, this guy, it's fine. He's fine.
He's a pretty good guy. Come on, let him in.
I think I was always just sitting there at practice singing anyway. So he's like, all right, just sit with them and sing. But then I started playing guitar. I think I got my first guitar when I was 10. So around there, started playing, and very quickly, like within the first couple of years, started playing with my dad at gigs. Like they bring me up for one song and I'd play Wonderwall because,
damn,
that's what everybody played,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was probably like 12, 13. I don't know. And then like the next summer I would play like 2 or 3 songs. And then finally, by the time I was like 15, I think I was doing full sets and stuff with them. So yeah, I mean, and then I was doing, I started bands with my friends and did it all through high school and college.
What was your first band's name? What was your first band's name?
I'm so glad you asked. My first band name ever was Hemi Demi Semiquaver. Also known as, we abbreviated it to HDSQ. That's what everyone called us. But as I'm sure you might probably know, a Hemi Demi Semiquaver is a 64th note. We were those kind of musical nerds. But actually, we didn't do it specifically for that reason. I remember this very clearly. We were trying to decide on a band name. We opened a dictionary, flipped pages, and just went and found words. And that was one of the words that popped up. None of us had ever heard it before. We're like, what is that?
What the hell is that?
Yeah. But it was one of the ones that stuck. And we're like, hey, it's musical. It's a music term. So we went with it. So that was my first band name. Hemi Demi Semiquaver.
But I mean, playing live, that's pretty quick to just be like, playing those covers, but then just like that, and then just jumping into it. Cause some people think about playing live.
Mm-hmm.
They never do. But you just kind of as you were growing with your instrument, like playing live was just a thing.
Yeah. I mean, it just seemed very natural to me, I guess, since, like I said, I started really young, but also when I would practice guitar when I was very young, I practiced a little bit what was in the books. The guitar teacher was like, here's a thing in a book, practice this and play it next time. I played it next time. I can't say that I practiced it. So it was a little bit of a struggle to get through.
Yeah.
And then we'd learn a song or two and I'd go through that. But on my own, I would just I'd plug in my guitar. Once I got an electric guitar, I remember going through and playing through albums that I loved just on repeat, mainly Green Day Dookie. That was the big one. Real Big Fish, for some reason. I remember playing that one all the time. I just loved the chords.
What was your go-to song on that one? Because Turn Off the Radio was like...
I mean, all of them, basically. I would play through the whole thing, but I mean, Sell Out was the big hit. Though I also liked She Has a Girlfriend Now. That was a fun one to play. Too, yeah, that's a fun one to play. I practiced those ones on my own a lot, so in my room, just like trying to mimic what they were doing and playing along to it. So I think it almost like felt like performing live, or at least it was practice for performing live. So yeah, it just came very naturally when it came time to actually do it. There was no hesitation about doing that.
That, your first band, and then subsequently bands from there.
Yeah.
Did it just keep on going where it just like band life was just integrated, where that was the thing that was always the thing?
It did until a point. Okay. I was in a couple bands throughout the years, college, and even a little bit post-college. And then I would say about 3 or 4 years after I graduated college, I actually got totally sick of it. And not the music, but more the other stuff that comes with it. You know, band disagreements, different opinions on how to operate as a band, how to make it as a band, et cetera, et cetera. This was at the time that MySpace was huge and like the only thing for bands. And my bandmate at that time, she was basically like sitting on MySpace all the time, which was great that she was promoting us, but we didn't even have a demo recorded yet. We barely had like 3 songs written. And she's out there like hyping us up, telling people about us. And they're like, oh, we're so excited. We can't wait till you come to our city. I'm like, we don't even have music. So, now
stylistically, what was that band kind of in the vein of?
It was very like dancey indie pop band at the time. So like this is like 2010.
Oh, I know the era.
So I can't really think of a specific example. We didn't sound like them, but I was listening to a lot of Passion Pit at the time. I was really into that. We did not necessarily go that realm.
Yeah.
Maybe like a little Franz Ferdinand-y, like that kind of dancey, disco-y beat, but yeah, something like that.
Was it just the idea that like to make it in music, you have to do a band?
Yeah, it was a little bit of that. It was just everybody around me was more concerned with, and everybody I was trying to be in a band with was more concerned with the other aspects, the promotion. And that's not to say that stuff isn't important, but I just felt like everyone was kind of losing focus on the music. And we weren't on the same page for the music. So I just got really burnt out on trying to make a band work with other people who I didn't really see eye to eye with. They're great people. A lot of them I'm still friends with, to this day, but being in a band with them just wasn't working. Yeah. So I got out of it for a while, any kind of making music. And that was kind of weird. Like I needed a little time away to rest and recharge, but then, I didn't really know what to do after that point.
Then at what point did you start to like get the songwriting itch?
Probably fairly recently. I got back into music after a few years. I started doing cover bands. I was in an all Beatles cover band for a little bit. That was really fun.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
We were acoustic based, so we weren't a tribute band because we weren't doing that whole like dress like them thing. We just played Beatles songs. It was fun. But then I was in and out of a couple of cover bands, and it was about I guess like 3 or 4 years ago at this point, I saw this band at a music festival, and it was just so incredible. I was so into the music, and I was like, I remember having this moment of like, I want to do what they're doing, and not necessarily meaning I want to be in a band and I want to, make incredible music and tour the country. I want to make people feel what I'm feeling right now. It just sort of re-inspired me. I hadn't written original music since 2010, basically. And this was like 2019. So, but that moment I was like, yeah, I want to think about doing it again. And then 2020 hit, and it won't even go there. We all know what happened.
You were talking about like that experience, like that there's something about the song that was like pulling you in. And it's like, that's the power too of like a really good song is shit, like where you're just like, shit, that's amazing. Like, that's so good. It's like, I want to write, as much as I write songs, I also have the list of songs that I'm like, I wish I wrote this too. And because it's just like, you love them just as much.
It was just such a different vibe than I had done before. Like I was always in like rock bands, which I still love, but like pop punk bands and ska bands and all kinds of stuff. But this particular band was like more of like a more chill kind of thing. And it was just different than what I was usually into, but I liked that feeling. So it just made me think too, like, oh, maybe I could do something different. I don't have to just write this one style of music all the time. I could try something a little off, like out of my style.
Just the idea of like when you're kind of a music junkie, it's like, I wouldn't mind writing a couple different things.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't want to just write this. And because when you're a band, it's like, it's the cycle where you write a song, you write an album, and you're like, oh, we are this album for the next year or 2 years until we can afford to then create another album, and then we're going to be this. So that's your identity.
People expect the next album to sound just like the first album too. You got to stay in that that lane, you know.
But the idea of having flexibility in different genres, also not feeling like you have to, I don't have to go on tour. We don't have to rent a van. We don't have to, okay, we should get a small U-Haul trip. Okay, we're going to need the, it's like none of that. How many shirt sizes do we have? Do we have enough smalls?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we do. We need to get but to eliminate that. Now, did you also think at the time, like, oh, it was just like, I just want to get back into songwriting, but did it entertain the idea of like maybe other things you could do with songwriting, like money-wise?
Yeah. I mean, at that time, it didn't really occur to me. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something. And so it didn't come until a little bit later. I mean, basically, like I said, in 2020, when I was spending all this time at home, I was like, I'm going to have a lot of time on my hands. I remember it was more just this desire to like, I need something to occupy my time.
Yeah.
And I remember like either the day before, like all the stores were going to shut down and everything, like we knew it was about to happen and it wasn't announced yet, or I think it was, but very quickly I called up my local music stores, a very small music shop in our city in Baltimore. And I was like, hey, do you have any USB interfaces? And they're like that small. I was like, I don't know. And he was like, I have one left.
Yeah.
I was like, how much is it? I didn't even care. But he's like, it's like 150. I was like, I will be there in like 5 minutes. Hold it for me. And it was really at first more to practice a little bit for my cover band at the time.
Yeah.
I was just thinking like, I was starting to get into like really focusing more on how to make my gear sound good.
Yeah.
And so I was like, let me try practicing and recording through the computer. So even though it wasn't quite for original songwriting at first, I knew I had to do it. I was starting to get the gear and all that stuff. So I got this interface, and thank God I did, because I probably would have went totally insane if I could not have been doing this for the first couple months. But I sat down and I got into it, and I was kind of trying to recreate. I started getting into digital effects to recreate certain bands' sounds to mimic them, just so I could better understand how to create guitar tones and all that kind of stuff. And slowly, as you start to look into that, you eventually fall into the realm of recording and producing from your home. You know, it just is going to happen. So that's kind of what happened. I started to watch some tutorials about how to, first I wanted to like mix and produce a little bit. And then I started getting into like how to record stuff. And then this random ad on Instagram popped up for this thing called Songwriting Bootcamp, or whatever it's called at the time. Songwriting for Guitar Bootcamp.
Yep.
And, went from there. That's what really got me, I think, going on the songwriting part.
That's crazy that, at first it started where it was just like, I kind of just, I don't want to be bored. Like, I'm getting this, and you get it. And then it's like, well, let me see if I can better recreate these tones. Can I try to and that's like a form of active listening, like, trusting your ear and A-being it to like, okay, how can I make this?
Absolutely.
And starting to identify, not being bogged down to by like, oh, this is like 10 dB, but it's being like, no, it sounds really fuzzy. And it's also like, I think there's like a fate. And then you try out some different components to be like, oh my God, that is like how I get like a Cure style sound guitar. Or it's like, oh, and that's the difference between like a Johnny Marr guitar. This is the difference between like just straight up clean indie rock. It's starting to compartmentalize in your head, like all these different sounds that you want to access, even if you don't need them now, but later down the road, you could be like, oh, to do this, you need this, and I need to pair it. And then it's funny that, yes, if you started to search this probably through algorithms, then I pop up on that being like, hey, what's up? It's just like, and I'm trying to think, you did the first boot camp, and I think it was the cartoon ad that we did. We did a cartoon ad.
I think so.
Yeah. It was a cartoon ad where I was just like,
you're like, hey, come check this out.
Come check it out because we're going to be doing it live. And yeah, then you ended up doing the boot camp and then you joined Riff to Radio. And I remember we did a workshop too. I think we did a 4-week thing that was tracking guitar. And we just talked about like the idea of like how you can do things from home and you can even do things that are mixing wise from home as well. And they don't have to be complicated. And what was really cool was you were a person that I noticed right away that was always doing the thing because, sometimes when people take classes or when they join, and there's nothing wrong with consuming the information.
Absolutely.
But then applying the information, you have to take that jump eventually and start doing it. What were your experiences in studios when you were recording as opposed to doing it in your home?
That's a tough question because it's been a while, but I actually didn't even really do a lot of the recording. Like I didn't do the guitar. I didn't play guitar in a lot of the original bands. I did a little bit, maybe live, but I was primarily the singer. Actually, I was always like the front man. My first band in college, which was the first time I ever did like a real studio recording, I was the front man. And for a little bit, like when we were in between members, I would play guitar and sing live. But then we got 2 guitar players, and I was just the singer. But I don't know. I mean, some of the difference is since we didn't have a producer, say, but we were working with a guy at his studio. He was, I'm just your recording engineer. Like I remember he was starting to fiddle with a pedal that my friend brought in, my bandmate brought in, and he really wanted to get the delay settings right. Like the engineer guy, he started messing around with it. And after like a half an hour, he's like, wait.
I'm not.
He's like, I'm not producing. He's like, I want it to sound good. I want it to sound right, but I don't have time for this. So, that being said, like he kind of took care of a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
I basically I'd go in the booth, I'd do my vocal take, and that was basically it. I mean, I do a couple vocal takes, give or take, but it wasn't super hands-on, and not because he wouldn't let us, but I just didn't have the experience at the time. I was much younger, but I didn't really get to play around a lot, because and first of all, we didn't have a lot of time in there. It's so expensive. So we were kind of like, all right, let's go.
Let's just do this now, get it out. And just like, there we go.
Yeah. So it wasn't a bad experience by any means. I had a lot of fun doing it. It was a great time, but I didn't really learn anything. Even you can see, like my first reaction was, I don't know. I didn't really learn a whole lot. I learned more about recording, probably just messing around with GarageBand on my laptop in college, just sitting around. And it's funny, I would make these little like 30-second like clips using all the like the built-in synths and stuff in GarageBand. And that's, I realized very early on, I'm like, that's more or less what we do. Like when you started talking about song starters, I was like, oh yeah, I do that.
Yeah. It's funny you just mentioned that going into a band and things are expensive. So it's like, you don't really have time to be like, let me think about the song. It's just like, cool, let's just lay this down. Let's just play it how we play it live. And I think, I've been there. Lots of people have been there where it's the one guy that's like, hi, I'm the engineer. And then they just hit the button and they're like, is that good? And you're just like, yeah,
I guess if you think so. Yeah.
Cool. All right. It's done. But then doing it yourself and starting to dive into, but realizing how close it is tied to songwriting, because sometimes people think, production is going to solve the songwriting issues. Like, people are like, oh, that'll be figured out in production, which I always, it's still one of my favorite things. Cause I'm like, it won't, if you're not sure about it now, throwing things in production. And I think as your technical skill was growing, your songwriting skills were starting to get better because I think you became a lot more focused.
Yeah.
And then you branched into co-writing.
Yes.
So how, from a band perspective, then going into this, how did you start to navigate co-writing?
Yeah, well, to me, co-writing is different. I guess, well, especially in this realm of what we're trying to do, it's different because everybody's kind of already on the same page. You have to talk it out a little bit ahead of time, but or I should say, we're here for the same reasons. That was something that I mentioned earlier. I was struggling with bands is we weren't all in it for the same reasons. We didn't all have the same goals or the same strategies, but like so far, at least with everyone that I've been co-writing with, we all kind of have the same goal in mind and we're on the same page in terms of strategies. But also I think what is freeing about co-writing is everybody has really defined roles. In a band, everybody's trying to do everything, but there's different ways to do it in a band. Is it everybody's responsible for their own part? Like the bass player writes the bass line and I write the guitar line and I write the vocals and sing and stuff. Or is it with co-writing, it's more like one person is writing the song and maybe like I'm there to support that, help them figure out like, you offer edits on different parts, but it's more clear like who's supposed to be doing what, who's doing the heavy lifting, who's worrying about the sound, the overall sound of the song, not who's worrying about the bass line. Like whatever, the bass line is gonna, not to, take away from it, but the bass line will fall into place naturally if you have a well-written song. Same for the guitar chords, same for the vocals, like it all should kind of fit together. So that was the sort of difference for me. It's just a different perspective. And it's much more collaborative. You would think of being in a band as collaborative, but it's not always very collaborative.
And it's interesting that you said like it's more focused because you're not writing with them unless you have the same kind of goal in mind. Because if you don't, you obviously know like, oh, like what you're doing isn't bad, but like mine isn't the same. So we're probably, we're not going to get what we want, and that's okay.
Yeah. And to that point, like when you're in a band, you have to keep writing songs and you have to keep writing songs together. Whereas with co-writes, you can keep writing songs with the people that you work well with, or you can write one song with a person and maybe you don't write with them again for, they go and write another song with someone else. You don't have to write like this whole album with the person. You certainly can, but so I guess what I mean more is like there's flexibility. Whereas in a band, you're forcing it sometimes. You're like,
and we don't have to get in a van with them. Like, it's just like, you can still like your co-writer and be like, you're great, you're awesome. See ya. And then you just turn off the screen.
Right. And then you come back when you're ready and you have he or she has another idea and you have another idea and you come back together and you do it. Whereas in a band, it's like, there's more of this pressure to be like, oh, we got to make this happen. Write another song. And that's where I think a lot of people crack, under the pressure of a band.
And what is awesome, like you were doing all of that. And for some people, they're like, cool, that's just what I want to do. I'm good.
Yeah.
Then you were ready to take things to the next level where it was just like, you were like, what made you think about not necessarily doing this as like a side hustle, but like starting to think about doing music?
Well, I guess seeing examples of people doing it for a living. And that was something that I thought about a lot at the beginning of this when I found out about, the songwriting and sync and all that stuff. I had no other standard. I had no other guide for how to make a living off of doing music when I was younger. You just thought like, okay, you try to make it in a rock band and that's the only way to do it. Or like I made a very specific choice to not study music in college because to me that meant like going to a conservatory, studying classical music to become a classical musician. And that did not interest me at all. So I thought either like the only options were rock star, which is very difficult you have to just be very lucky basically, or stuffy classical musician, which classical music is amazing. I love it, but I didn't want to play it.
Yeah.
I'll certainly learn it to get better, but I thought the only thing that paid essentially was being a classical musician and playing in symphonies and all that kind of stuff. So this sort of opened a new avenue to me. I was like, oh wow, people are doing this. Like it wasn't just, it was like I saw that you were doing it, but again, the algorithms are showing me all these people that can do it, can write music for television and video games or movies or trailers, whatever. I was like, oh, I never even like thought about that. So I guess the reason why I wanted to make this change and really try to do this for a living is because I was like, oh, this is a new pathway to doing that I never knew existed.
It's crazy when you realize like for all your life, you believe like it's those two, and that's pretty much too how I viewed before a lot of things, just like it's either needs to be the band vehicle or you have to do like the serious classical musicians, like two opposite ends of the pendulum. And that's it. Those are the only two options. But meanwhile, it's just like, oh, wait a minute. There's like all these other options and all these other alternatives. And what's great is like we're doing an entire year of coaching where we're meeting weekly, and as we're filming, recording this is April.
Yeah.
You have done so much in these past, like we're not even 4 months in, and it's crazy to think how your productions have gotten better because you're just getting a habit of just doing it all the time. And it's just like each one gets more and more on point. And it's like your mixing is getting better, but also too, you're branching where you're taking the knowledge of what you have and you're just like teaching others. And it's just like, to me, that's also will sharpen your skills even more, because just like through helping others learn the craft and just like the instrument, your view of the instrument suddenly just like is like, oh wow.
Yeah.
It just grows.
Yeah. I mean, working with people and getting to teach them a little bit, or at least give them advice and even work and grow together. Like I learn from other people, they learn from me. You know, I learned a technique the other day. I'm like, oh, did you try this? Oh, I didn't even know about that. Did you do this? Oh, no, I didn't know about that. Yeah, that's been super helpful in growing and learning new stuff, like you were saying. Just and then even just working on my own sometimes too. Like just today, I was telling you the other day about I'm the new guitar I'm getting, and you know,
which is
my
really
current
sweet.
guitars.
It looks
really
so
sweet.
good.
But I actually was going through today. I made recordings of each of my current electric guitars, the same track, same settings and everything, just to listen to them and compare. So I think that's something else I've started doing. And I started to really notice the little subtle differences between like, all right, here's what my SG sounded like. Here's what my Les Paul sounded like. Here's what my Strat sounded like. And it's not to say I didn't know that before, but I didn't pay attention to it with like as close of detail, you know? So I've been focused on those kind of things too. And so especially when working with other people, I'm like I'm listening to music differently now. You know, I'm listening to our recordings differently.
It's interesting when you're like, oh, I'm listening to all these different guitars, just like, oh, what this one sounds like and this one sounds like. It's almost like when you reread a book or watch a movie, you pick up on things that you didn't see the second time, and you're like, oh, I totally missed that. And that's why just even going through some of the process of just like listening to your guitars again, or using some of the same settings, but like how you view it and how you listen to it is going to be different, because songs have happened since then. Your ears have heard different things since then, and it's going to make you aware of so much more. Yeah. And sometimes it's not about going crazy on the path, but actually just refining what you have, and can it be better?
Yeah. And I would say to that point too, like working with other people helps me expand that knowledge too, because I'm working with people that maybe work in a slightly different style than I would on my own. You know, and so I'm listening to that, and I'm listening to that differently, you know, not that it's wildly outside of my wheelhouse. It's stuff that I have experience with, but they're always going to bring something different to the table, you know?
Yeah.
So like if someone's more of like an acoustic, like indie pop writer, or maybe someone has a little bit more of like, not heavy, but like a grungier 90s kind of feel to it or something, you know, but just the way something I've noticed with the people I've collaborated with so far is like, I would not have thought to do it that way, you know, because it's not my instinct, it's not my style, it's not it's not what I'm familiar with. You know, we all have our tendencies. That's more what I'm thinking. So their tendency is completely different than mine. So now but like I have to do it, you know, I have to get that experience and work with them in this new style. And now, hey, now I have a new style that I can work in, and I can maybe bring that to the next person, you know, and a little bit of that color to it, you know.
Now, what's awesome too, what we're focusing on is building up like your lesson business, because that's one vehicle of building up lessons, you're teaching and you're getting students. And then the other half is just focusing on building things that are syncable. Because I think what most people think, oh, isn't there just one avenue that you can just like make money in music and you just got to do that? It's like sometimes it's it's kind of those different revenue streams that you have to start building. And those are the two that we're doing right now. And the lessons are going well, and you're starting to like build that up. If somebody's listening to this and they're just like, I don't know, that sounds like, I don't think I can do that. Like, that seems like it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I guess, and we said this before I hit record, if you had to go back to like the Dan of like a year and a half, that was like, what would the present Dan say to past Dan?
A lot of things, but I guess I would say it's going to take a while, but not as long as you think.
Yeah.
You know, you definitely have to be patient and take your time with it, but break it down into smaller steps. That's something that basically everybody that I've been learning from has always said. It's like break things down into smaller pieces. That'll help it seem a little bit more achievable. But I say that to say, like, don't get discouraged, because it can seem daunting, even with having these different, like you said, different revenue streams, different options. It can seem like a lot, but it's completely doable. And I've actually been surprised, like you mentioned a little bit ago, like it's April. I remember going into this year of coaching with you, like not entirely knowing what to expect, like having big ideas for it, but not really knowing like when we'd get there or what it would look like. And, oh my God, is it going to be a lot? And like, we're just gonna be going all the time. And that's not necessarily been the case, like doing a lot. But so at first I was like, oh man, like, is this going to take a really long time or what? And then almost like out of nowhere, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm doing it.
I think you said in our last session, the realization of like, wait a minute, I'm doing the thing. I'm doing it.
Yeah. Like I was so concerned with like, how am I going to make this happen? How am I going to make this happen? And it just happened. So I guess let's say, like, don't stress about it. As long as you put in the work, and keep focusing and stay focused on it, it's completely doable. But it's also been fun. Like all these things, all these options, teaching for me is fun. Spending most days like recording music or trying to work on a new track is fun. Like I said earlier, that's what I used to do in GarageBand. That's how I really learned recording, was just for no reason. Just be like, all right, let me just mess around and make some random like do 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 do, and then put chords around it and put a drum beat to it and figure out which synth sounds go best with that little riff. So to do that all the time, like to be able to do that a little bit each day and then teach a little bit each day and do all these little things, it's really rewarding, but really fun and enjoyable. So even while you're learning, that's like, it's just an incredible feeling.
And I think what makes you very coachable is like you entertain the idea that it's a possibility. Like sometimes people think about like, I think Myron Golden says this, where it's like can and can't. Like people are like, I can't do this. I can't. Those are literally two things that have not yet happened, but you're choosing that one of them has already happened. So when people say I can't do this, and I'm like, well, why? I just can't.
Yeah.
Well, you're just assuming that it just can't work out then? It's just like, but if you say I can, both are a form of belief. It's just like, which one do you want to? So can and can't are two forms of belief. And you leaned on just like, if you just entertain it for a little bit, just a little bit, it's amazing what happens. And if somebody is on, like, they're like, coaching seems like that's just a handful. What's the point? I could probably do this on my own. YouTube, I could probably read some books. I'm good. What would you say to the person that's kind of dismissing that route?
No, it's not the same at all. You can definitely learn a lot. I mean, I started out by watching YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff, but at a certain point, if you really want to be serious about it, you need help, whether that's in how to do it as a business or how to get better at recording aspects or all of it. You're going to need some kind of help. At least I know I needed a little bit of help. I've definitely been that kind of person in the past to say like, I can't do that. And it wasn't ever because I didn't believe that I could.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a fear, it was just worrying about, well, what if it doesn't work out? I think I can do it, but what if it doesn't work the way I want it to work? But that's going to happen. It's not going to work the way you want it to work all the time necessarily. So at a certain point, you have to kind of take a chance. Another aspect of it that I've really been pushing. So I've been pushing myself in that regard over the past year. Another aspect that I've been pushing myself is sharing my work. I used to be completely terrified to share my original music. And both in doing that and putting it out there, like just putting out files on the internet, and even with sharing it with other people that I'm working with, I've found that, like, people actually like the music that I write. They don't think it's terrible garbage.
It's funny that you mentioned it. So those worst case scenarios in our head, we think it's like, the plan's going to explode. People are going to scream, be like, this is awful. And then we put it out and people are like, it's cool. And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you can knock down a little bit of that wall, it's like, oh, wait a minute, they liked it. Well, I thought they wouldn't. Okay, so that's not true. I wonder what else I'm telling myself that isn't true.
Exactly.
And immediately it starts to crumble.
I had a great moment with the song I was working on this week, the theme song track that I'm working on with a buddy. We're each working on our own and we're submitting them together, like as a team. But I was really struggling with the one that I was working on, and I sent him a real quick demo version of it. Like I did one verse worth of vocals and it was really bad. Like the recording was bad, but I was so nervous about it. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to get it done. It's due tonight. I'm not going to get it done. I'm just not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. But I sent it to him and he was like, dude, it sounds great. Like he loved it. I was like, oh, okay. And all of a sudden, like this wave of calm just like washed over me. And all of a sudden then I was like, okay, then I was able to get it done. I was like, okay. And I gave myself an hour, like, like we talk about, and I just did it and I got it done and it was not a problem. And I had this moment of realization. It's so funny, like that you asked about this and we were talking about this today. Cause like, it made me realize like, hey, get over it sometimes, like you're doing it, just do it. It's good. Like you wouldn't be here doing it if it wasn't good or if it was that bad, at least, and I'm not saying I'm amazing and, I know everything at this point. I still have a lot to learn, but I'm at a pretty decent point. So I shouldn't worry about it so much. I shouldn't be so scared. Don't let that fear hold you back.
But it's funny you said as soon as he said it was good, all of that just like washed away and you were just like, oh, I feel fine. And it's just like, it's funny how it was like, well, what was holding you back? That feeling. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a technical issue. It wasn't a crazy, it was literally just like that concern was the thing. And it's like, hopefully people that are like feeling this, because everybody does, we all do, where we're just like, oh, this is, but as you said, wait a minute, I wouldn't be here right now.
Right.
Like if it was like, it's not nails on a chalkboard. It's just like, and it's also too, just letting go a little bit of that and just being like, okay, that's a song and I have done it. Yeah. I've done it. And there we go. I'll tighten what needs to be. And there we go. It's out. As opposed to a lot of folks that have just all these half songs that are just like, they start to do it, but then that, and then it stops. And then they get the courage to do another one, but then it kicks in again, like, well, it might not be good, and stop. And then, of course, you get like the all the demos of just like half-written songs.
Yeah, and you're always going to hear stuff when you finish a song, like, oh, I could have done this a little better, or I could have done that a little bit better. But there's always next time. This song is good enough. Don't spend like so much time worrying and fretting over this one, or even if you finish it and you're still like, it's still not like perfect. It's not going to be perfect. But you can make a better one next time. Like that's how you learn. You don't learn by constantly trying to make the same song as the best it can be, because you're never gonna feel that way about it.
Because one of your goals doing licensing, they're briefs, things are time sensitive. And so you're already getting in that mindset of just being like, hey, I just have to get this done. This is not, I don't have 12 days. It's just like, this is it.
Yeah.
I got to be okay with it. I got to make some decisions. And you have like, I remember one of our assignments, like you were just doing a track every day. You were just like, oh, just done. This is it. But you're right. I look at all the stuff that I still do and things that I'm doing now, and I'm still like, I should have done that. Mm-hmm. I'll file it away for next time, because you're always going to.
There's going to be a next time.
There's going to be a next time. You're going to pick up something. Yeah, nothing is perfect, but that is okay.
And what's the worst that's going to happen? You submit it and they say no. Okay. Like, so what? Even if you wrote an amazing song, there's still like at least a 50-50 chance, probably greater, that they're going to say no, because there's also a lot of other people out there writing great songs and they can only pick one. So you could write a really great song and they won't pick it.
It's hilarious.
Write a bad song and they won't pick it, but you could write it and then do another one, and eventually one's going to get picked.
If they ask for like, Coldplay, and then you give them something like it that could be to a T like the next Bohemian Rhapsody, and they're just like, that's not Coldplay. We didn't ask for that. Sorry. Yeah, and then you're just like, no, but it's like, you realize that now in context of like, hey, it's okay. Yeah. Because if this doesn't get picked up, there could be another library that picks it up and I'll be fine. Right. Yeah. And then I'll write another song. So I love that. And we're going to be checking in later in the year. But if people want to find you and they want to be like, okay, this is interesting, I want to see what Dan's working on, where can they find you?
Yeah. So I just set up a website at danwalkerguitar.com. So they can go there. I guess if you're really interested, you can look at my Instagram. It's, not even going to say it because it's weird spelling. Go to facebook.com/IamDanWalker.
There you go.
That's easier.
Awesome, Dan. Well, we're going to check in later. I can't believe I'm saying this, but before we know it, it'll probably crop up where I'll be like, the end of 2022.
It's the holidays. Like, what? Yeah.
I know.
What is time anymore?
I don't know time. I'm still trying to figure that out, but thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, no problem.
So maybe you're listening to this and you're like, I want to do what Dan's doing right now. I want guidance. I want to jump in. I need a plan, because if I get that plan, I can start implementing it. And when I implement it, I know I can go to where I'm supposed to be. Here's the thing. I have one open spot right now. So what we're going to do is we're opening up one coaching spot for someone that I'll work with for the rest of 2022. So the rest of the year, I'm going to work with you. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, there's a link to a form that you are going to click and you're going to fill it out. And then after you fill it out, I'm going to look it over. I'm going to reach out to you. And if we're right to work together, guess what? That's what we're going to do. And for the rest of this year, we're going to crush it. We're going to work together to put systems in place, to give you a roadmap, clarity, things that you can do that will improve your skills, but take you to that next level where you want to be. So when we end this year, guess what? You feel way more confident and you step into 2023 with a freaking plan on how to use this, that you can start making money in music, because believe me, my friend, it's so possible. There were points where I thought it wasn't. But then I had mentors that helped me along the way to make me realize that I had tons of gold. I just needed help. I needed systems. I needed guidance. So maybe that's where you're at right now. So what I want you to do is I want you to click on that form. I want you to fill it out, and then I'll be in contact with you. And that does it for this week's episode. It was edited and produced by Chris Valius. I'm Mike Myers. Thanks for listening.